This channel focuses on stories about the lives of single fathers, where I share the hidden struggles, pressures, and quiet love that are not always expressed in real life. The videos use AI to support elements such as voice and visuals, but all content is carefully crafted, edited, and developed through storytelling. These stories are fictional and inspired by various real life situations, so they are meant to be experienced as narratives rather than taken as absolute truth. To me, even if a story isn't entirely real, as long as it can touch emotions and make people reflect, it still holds real value.
The crowbar hit the wooden beam with a crack that echoed through the silent gallery. Ethan Walker didn't hesitate. He pried open the rotted section while lawyers, movers, and a furious landlord watched in stunned silence. His flashlight beam swept across the interior, revealing something that shouldn't be there. A solid steel support beam, unmarked and perfectly intact. The structural damage was a lie. The emergency eviction was fraud, and in that single moment, everything changed. But this story didn't start with exposed corruption. It started 3 weeks earlier, when two desperate women appeared at his warehouse door in the rain. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. And if you're enjoying this, hit that like button. Let's get started. Ethan Walker had learned to measure his life in careful increments. 6-foot pine planks, quarter-inch dowels, 45-degree miters. Everything precise, everything intentional, everything under control. At 32 years old, he'd built a world inside his San Francisco warehouse workshop that operated on logic, not emotion. Wood didn't lie. Wood didn't change its mind. Wood didn't walk away when things got hard. People did. The warehouse sat in a commercial district south of Market Street, tucked between a printing company and an auto body shop that had been closed for renovation since February. Ethan had converted the second floor into a living space years ago. A bedroom for himself, a smaller one for his daughter Riley, a kitchen area, and a bathroom he'd plumbed himself. The ground floor remained his workspace: table saws, drill presses, hand tools organized on pegboards, and stacks of lumber sorted by type and grain. It wasn't fancy, but it was his. Riley was 7 now, smart as hell and twice as stubborn. She had her mother's dark eyes and his tendency to ask questions that didn't have easy answers. Her mother, Ethan's ex-wife, had left when Riley was 2, decided motherhood wasn't what she wanted after all, and moved to Portland with a guy she'd met at a yoga retreat. Ethan got full custody by default. No fight, no drama, just paperwork and silence. He'd been raising Riley alone ever since. "Dad, can I sand this one?" Riley stood at his workbench holding a small wooden box he'd been assembling. It was supposed to become a jewelry case for her teacher's birthday. Riley's idea, not his. "Use the fine grit paper," Ethan said, not looking up from the chair leg he was shaping. "And go with the grain, not against it." "I know, Dad. You've told me like 100 times. Then you should be an expert by now." She grinned and got to work, her small hands moving carefully over the wood. Ethan watched her from the corner of his eye, the same way he always did. She was good at this, patient, focused. Maybe she'd actually want to learn the trade someday, or maybe she'd decide woodworking was boring and go do something completely different. Either way, he'd make sure she had the choice. That was the job. Give her stability, give her options, keep her safe. The rain started just after 5 that evening. It came down hard and fast, the kind of October storm that turned San Francisco's streets into rivers and made the old warehouse roof sound like a snare drum. Ethan was cleaning up the workshop, sweeping sawdust into piles, while Riley sat at the kitchen table upstairs doing her homework. He heard the knock over the noise of the rain, 3 solid strikes against the metal side door. He wasn't expecting anyone. Ethan set the broom down and crossed the workshop floor, boots scuffing against concrete. He pulled the door open and found 2 women standing in the downpour, both soaked through, both holding suitcases that looked expensive even while dripping wet. The older one spoke first. "Ethan Walker?" He recognized her immediately, even though it had been years. Lena Hart. She'd been a year ahead of him in high school, the kind of girl who seemed to move through life with a confidence that didn't need to announce itself. She'd been class president, debate captain, and completely out of his orbit. They'd maybe spoken twice. Now she stood on his doorstep in a black coat and ruined heels, her dark hair plastered to her face, looking like someone who'd just had the worst day of her life. The younger woman beside her had to be her sister. Same sharp cheekbones, Same intelligent eyes, but softer somehow, less guarded. Lena, Ethan said slowly, what are you doing here? I need help. Her voice was steady, but he could hear the exhaustion underneath. We both do. He glanced at the suitcases. What kind of help? The kind that involves letting us stay here for a while. Ethan blinked. Stay here? Yes. In my warehouse? Yes. He looked past them at the rain, then back at Lena's face. She wasn't joking. Neither was her sister. You want to explain why? He asked. Lena's jaw tightened. Because as of 6 hours ago, we're homeless. Damn. Ethan let them in because he wasn't the kind of person who left people standing in the rain, even if their request made absolutely no sense. He led them upstairs to the living area, grabbed 2 towels from the bathroom, and handed them over without comment. Riley had looked up from her math worksheet with wide, curious eyes. Dad, who are they? Old friend from school, Ethan said. And her sister. They're going to stay for a bit. Riley's eyebrows went up. Here? Yeah. Where are they going to sleep? Good question. Lena dried her face with the towel, looking around the space with an expression Ethan couldn't quite read. The apartment wasn't much. Bare walls, functional furniture, nothing decorative except for a few of Riley's drawings taped to the fridge. It was clean, but it wasn't the kind of place someone like Lena Hart probably expected to end up. Her sister, Sophie, Lena introduced her, set her suitcase down carefully and offered Riley a small smile. Hi there, I'm Sophie. I'm Riley. She studied Sophie for a moment, then looked at Ethan. Can they stay in the guest room? We don't have a guest room, kiddo. Then where? I'll figure it out. He turned to Lena. Sit, both of you. I'll make coffee, and then you're going to tell me what the hell is going on. Lena looked like she wanted to argue, but she just nodded and sank into one of the kitchen chairs. Sophie followed her lead. They both looked exhausted in a way that went beyond just being wet and cold. Ethan started the coffee maker and leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Start talking. Lena took a breath. I own an art gallery in the financial district, the Hart Collection. Maybe you've heard of it. He hadn't. We've been operating there for 6 years, she continued. It's a good space. High ceilings, natural light, foot traffic. We show contemporary artists, host exhibitions, connect buyers with emerging talent. It's been successful, really successful. Okay, Ethan said. So what happened? Our landlord happened. Lena's voice went flat. A man named Richard Calloway. He bought the building 2 years ago, raised our rent by 20%, and has been trying to force us out ever since. Sophie spoke up, her voice quieter. We've always paid on time, never missed a payment, but he wants the space for something else, probably luxury condos or some tech company willing to pay triple what we do. So he evicted you, Ethan said. Not exactly. Lena's hands curled into fists on the table. This morning, we showed up to open the gallery and found the doors chained shut. There was a notice taped to the front, emergency closure due to structural damage. The building inspector supposedly found severe rot in the support beams. Calloway claimed the whole structure was unsafe and that we had to vacate immediately. Ethan frowned. Did you get advance warning? None. No inspection notice, no chance to respond, nothing. Just chains and a piece of paper. Lena's voice cracked slightly. All of our inventory is locked inside. Paintings worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Client pieces we're holding on consignment. Our computers, our records, everything. And we can't access any of it. What about the bank accounts? Frozen, Sophie said bitterly. Calloway filed an emergency petition claiming we owe back rent and damages. It's all lies, but until we can get into court, everything's on hold. Riley had stopped pretending to do homework. She was listening intently, her pencil forgotten. Ethan poured coffee into 2 mugs and set them on the table. His mind was already working through the problem, sorting details the way he sorted wood grain. Where were you living before? Above the gallery, Lena said. There's a loft space on the 3rd floor. That's our home. Or it was. So you lost your business and your apartment in one move. Yes. And you came here because... Lena met his eyes. Because I didn't know where else to go. There was something raw in that admission, something that didn't match the confident girl he remembered from high school. Ethan had the sudden sense that he was seeing a version of Lena Hart she didn't usually let people see, the version that was scared and out of options. "I know we barely know each other," Lena continued. "I know this is completely out of nowhere, but I remembered you worked with wood, and I remembered you had this place, and I just—" She stopped, shook her head. "I'm sorry, this was a mistake. We shouldn't have come." She started to stand, but Ethan held up a hand. "Sit down." Lena hesitated, then sat. Ethan looked at Riley. "Go brush your teeth and get ready for bed, okay?" "But Dad—" "Now, Riles." She huffed but obeyed, gathering her homework and heading toward the bathroom. Once she was out of earshot, Ethan turned back to Lena and Sophie. "How long do you need to stay?" Lena blinked. "What? How long until you get this sorted out? A few days? A week?" I don't know. Maybe 2 weeks if we can get a court date fast enough." "Fine." Ethan pushed off the counter. "You can stay, both of you." Sophie's face lit up with relief, but Lena just stared at him. "Just like that?" "Just like that." "Why?" Ethan shrugged. "Because you need help, and I've got space. It's not complicated." "It's extremely complicated," Lena said quietly. "Then we'll uncomplicate it." He nodded toward the workshop below. "I'll build you a room downstairs tonight. Private space, locking door, enough room for both of you. It won't be fancy, but it'll be yours. You can't just build a room in one night. Watch me." Ethan worked through the night. He'd sent Lena and Sophie to sleep in his bed while he took the couch. Non-negotiable, he'd told them. And once Riley was asleep and the apartment was quiet, he went downstairs and got to work. He had enough framed wall panels left over from a renovation job last year, and he knew exactly how to configure them. The design came together in his head as he measured. An 8x10 space in the back corner of the workshop, far enough from the machinery to be quiet, but close enough to the bathroom access. 2 walls would be existing warehouse structure. He'd build the other 2 from scratch. Simple frame construction, drywall on both sides for soundproofing, a solid door with a keyed lock. He cut studs, assembled frames, screwed panels into place. His hands moved on autopilot, muscle memory from thousands of hours doing exactly this kind of work. By 2 in the morning, the walls were up. By 4, he'd hung the door and installed the lock. By 6, he was painting the interior a clean white and laying down area rugs he'd pulled from storage. When Lena came downstairs just after 7, the room was finished. She stopped in the doorway of the workshop, staring at the new structure like it had appeared by magic. "You actually built a room. I told you I would." Ethan was cleaning his paintbrushes in the utility sink, exhaustion pulling at his shoulders. He hadn't slept, but he'd finished the job. "There's an outlet inside, and I ran a cord so you'll have light. I'll pick up a couple of air mattresses today, and you can use the bathroom upstairs. It's not the Ritz, but it's private." Lena walked slowly toward the new room, her hand trailing along the doorframe. The construction was clean, professional, with tight corners and smooth seams. She stepped inside and turned in a slow circle, taking in the fresh paint, the rugs, the small folding table he'd set up in the corner. When she came back out, her eyes were wet. "Ethan." "It's fine," he said quickly. "You needed a place. Now you have one. You did this in one night. I work fast." She shook her head, blinking hard. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to." He set the brushes aside to dry and wiped his hands on a rag. "I'm going to take Riley to school, then I'll grab those air mattresses. Make yourselves at home." Lena looked like she wanted to say something else, but Sophie appeared at the top of the stairs, and the moment passed. "Wow," Sophie breathed, looking at the room. "You actually did it." "Yeah." Ethan grabbed his jacket. "I'll be back in a couple hours." He left before either of them could say anything else. Over the next few days, a strange new rhythm developed. Lena and Sophie settled into the makeshift room like it was temporary housing during a disaster, which Ethan supposed it was. They were quiet, respectful, and clearly trying not to be a burden. Sophie spent most of her time on her laptop, fielding calls with lawyers and insurance agents, her voice tight with frustration. Lena made phone calls too, but hers were different. Clients, artists, apologies for delayed exhibitions. Ethan kept working. He had 3 custom furniture orders to complete and a deadline looming, so he spent his days in the workshop with the saw running and the radio playing low. Riley came home from school each afternoon and did her homework at the kitchen table, occasionally venturing downstairs to ask Sophie questions about art, or to show Lena a drawing she'd made. Lena was good with her, patient. She didn't talk down to Riley the way some adults did, and Riley responded to that. One evening, Ethan was finishing up a dining table when Lena appeared beside his workbench. She'd changed out of the business clothes she'd been wearing when she arrived and was dressed in jeans and a sweater that made her look younger, less formal. "Can I ask you something?" she said. Ethan set down his sander. "Sure." "Why did you really let us stay?" He considered the question. "I already told you." "You said it wasn't complicated, but it is, and we both know it." She leaned against the bench, her arms crossed. "You don't owe me anything. We barely knew each other in high school." "That's true." "So why?" Ethan looked at her for a long moment. "You ever been in a situation where you needed help and nobody stepped up?" Something flickered across Lena's face. "Yes." "Then you know what it feels like." He picked up the sander again. "I had space. You needed it. That's the whole story." "I don't think it is." Lena's voice was quiet. "But thank you anyway." She started to walk away, then paused. "Ethan?" "Yeah?" "The building Callaway claims is structurally unsafe? It was built in 1987. I looked up the permits. Do you know what the framing standards were back then?" Ethan's hand stilled on the sander. "Steel reinforced timber for anything over 3 stories." "Exactly." Lena turned to face him fully. "So if the support beams are steel reinforced, how do they have rot?" Ethan set the tool down. "They wouldn't." "That's what I thought." Lena's expression hardened. "I think Callaway's lying. I think the inspection report is fake, and I think he's counting on us not being able to prove it before he seizes everything in the gallery and sells it." "Can he do that legally?" "If we can't pay the storage fees he's claiming we owe, yes. He'll auction everything to cover the debt." She made air quotes with her fingers, her frustration obvious. "We have 10 days before that happens." Ethan's mind was already running scenarios. If the beams were steel reinforced, and if Callaway had fabricated the damage, then there'd be evidence. Fake reports, forged signatures, something that didn't add up. "You need to get back inside that building," he said. "I know, but it's chained shut, and breaking in would give Callaway exactly the ammunition he needs to make us look like the bad guys." "What if you didn't have to break in?" Ethan said slowly. Lena's eyes sharpened. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if someone who knows construction went to the building with a legitimate reason to inspect it? Someone who could verify whether the damage is real or not? Like a building inspector? Like a carpenter?" Understanding dawned on Lena's face. "You. Me." "Ethan, if Callaway catches you, say he won't." Ethan was already planning it out. "I'll go during business hours. Act like I'm doing a consultation for a potential buyer. I know how to read structural damage. If those beams are faked, I'll know." Lena stared at him. "You'd do that?" "You're staying in my workshop," Ethan said simply. "That makes this my problem too." For the first time since she'd arrived, Lena smiled, really smiled, not the tight, professional expression she'd been wearing like armor. It changed her entire face. "Okay," she said. "Let's do it." Two days later, Ethan stood outside the building that housed the Hart Collection. It was a beautiful structure, 4 stories of red brick with tall windows and ornate ironwork that spoke to the craftsmanship of another era. The ground floor had been converted into retail space, with the gallery occupying the prime corner unit. The windows were dark now, and heavy chains looped through the door handles, secured with industrial padlocks. A notice was taped to the glass. "Closed by order of building inspector. Structural hazard." Ethan studied the facade. The brickwork looked solid. No visible cracks, no settling, no signs of foundation issues. He walked the perimeter slowly, checking the corners, the roof line, the window frames. Everything looked stable. "Can I help you?" Ethan turned to find a man in an expensive suit watching him from the sidewalk. Late 50s, silver hair, the kind of confident posture that came from having money and knowing it. Just looking, Ethan said. The building's closed. I can see that. Ethan nodded toward the notice. Structural damage? That's right. The man's smile didn't reach his eyes. Very unfortunate. The tenants didn't maintain the property, and now we're dealing with the consequences. You the owner? Richard Calloway. And you are? Ethan Walker. I'm a carpenter. He kept his voice neutral, professional. I heard the space might be available soon, and I'm looking for a workshop. Thought I'd check it out. Calloway's expression shifted slightly, calculation replacing suspicion. Well, it will be available once we clear out the current inventory and make the necessary repairs. Might be a few months. What kind of structural damage are we talking about? Rotted support beams on the second floor. The whole thing's a liability. Calloway gestured dismissively. The inspector said it's a miracle the building hasn't collapsed already. Mind if I take a look? I'm pretty good at assessing that kind of thing. I'm afraid not. Insurance won't allow anyone inside until the repairs are complete. Ethan nodded slowly. Makes sense. Can I get a copy of the inspection report? Just want to know what I'd be getting into. Calloway's smile tightened. That's not public record. Building inspections are always public record. Not when there's an ongoing legal dispute. Calloway straightened his tie. If you're seriously interested in leasing the space, leave your contact information with my office. We'll be in touch when the time is right. He handed Ethan a business card and walked away without another word. Ethan watched him go, his instincts screaming that something was wrong. Calloway was too defensive, too quick to shut down questions. And his story about the beams didn't make sense. If the damage was as severe as he claimed, there would be visible signs on the exterior, sagging floors, cracked walls, something. There was nothing. Ethan pulled out his phone and took photos of the building from every angle, focusing on the structural elements. Then he texted Lena. Need to talk, found something. Her response came back immediately. I'm here. What did you find? Not over text. I'll be back in 20 minutes. He pocketed his phone and took one last look at the building. Whatever Calloway was hiding, Ethan was going to find it. And when he did, Lena was going to get her gallery back. That night, Ethan spread architectural plans across his workbench. Lena had pulled them from her files, the original construction blueprints for the building, dated 1987, showing every beam, joist, and support column in precise detail. Sophie stood beside her, and Riley sat on a stool nearby, watching with fascination as Ethan traced his finger along the diagram. Here, he said, tapping the paper. These are the primary support beams for the second floor. According to the plans, they're steel I-beams with timber cladding. The steel does the actual load-bearing work. The wood is just cosmetic. So if the wood has rot, Lena started. It wouldn't matter, Ethan finished. The steel would still be holding everything up. You'd need to replace the cladding eventually, but it's not a structural emergency. It's maintenance. Sophie leaned in closer. But Calloway's claiming the whole building is unsafe, which means either he doesn't know what he's talking about or he's lying on purpose. Ethan straightened. My money's on lying. How do we prove it? Lena asked. We need to see the actual beams. Ethan pointed to a section of the blueprint. If I'm right, the rot is superficial. The steel underneath will be fine. But if we can document that, get photos, show that the damage isn't critical, then Calloway's whole case falls apart. But we can't get inside, Sophie said. The building's locked down. Ethan was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he looked at Lena. When's the auction scheduled? Next Wednesday, 10 days from now. And when are the movers coming to clear out the inventory? Lena's face went pale. Tomorrow. Calloway filed an emergency order to remove everything for safekeeping before the auction. Then that's our window. Ethan's voice was calm, certain. When the movers show up, so do we. Ethan, we can't just... Yes, we can. He met her eyes. You have every right to be there when they move your property. You're the tenant. And I'm a structural consultant you've hired to assess the damage. Completely legal. Calloway will try to stop us. Let him try. Riley's voice piped up from her stool. Are you going to fight the bad guy, Dad? Ethan smiled slightly. Not with fists, kiddo. With facts. Lena looked at Sophie, then back at Ethan. He could see the fear in her eyes, but he could also see something else. Hope, maybe, or determination. Okay, she said finally. Tomorrow morning, we'll be ready. Quad. The next day arrived gray and cold. Ethan woke early, made breakfast for Riley, and drove her to school while Lena and Sophie prepared for what was coming. When he got back to the warehouse, they were both dressed in business clothes. Armor, Ethan thought, for the battle ahead. "You ready?" he asked. Lena nodded. "As ready as I'll ever be." They drove to the gallery in Ethan's truck, the silence heavy with anticipation. When they arrived, a moving van was already parked at the curb, and two workers in company uniforms were standing by the chained doors. Richard Calloway was there too, clipboard in hand, looking smug. His expression shifted when he saw Lena. "Ms. Hart, what a surprise." "I'm here to supervise the removal of my property," Lena said evenly, "as is my legal right. The property is being held as collateral. Until the auction, yes, which means it's still mine." Lena's voice was steel. "And this is Ethan Walker, the structural consultant I've hired to assess the building's condition." Calloway's gaze swung to Ethan. Recognition flickered. "We've met." "We have," Ethan said. "I'm here to verify your claims about the structural damage." "That won't be necessary." "Actually, it is." Ethan pulled a folded document from his jacket, a fake consulting contract he and Lena had drafted the night before. "Ms. Hart has the right to an independent assessment. If you'd like to dispute that, we can call the city and wait for them to send someone down." Calloway's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. He knew that pushing back too hard would raise red flags. "Fine," he said curtly, "but make it quick. The movers are on a schedule." The chains came off and the doors swung open. Inside, the gallery was exactly as Lena had described. High ceilings, polished floors, track lighting illuminating empty walls where paintings had once hung. The air smelled faintly of paint and varnish. Crates were stacked along one wall, each carefully labeled with inventory numbers. The movers started loading them immediately. Ethan ignored them. He moved through the space slowly, his eyes scanning the ceiling, the walls, the floor. He was looking for signs of stress, cracks in the plaster, uneven flooring, anything that would indicate structural failure. There was nothing. He climbed the stairs to the second floor, Lena close behind. This level had been used for storage and office space, with exposed beams running across the ceiling. Ethan stopped in the center of the room and looked up. There, one of the support beams had a section of visibly rotted wood, the timber dark and crumbling. It looked bad, exactly the kind of damage that would justify an emergency closure. But Ethan knew better. He pulled a pry bar from his tool belt and approached the beam. "What are you doing?" Calloway's voice came from the stairs. He'd followed them up, and his face was tight with alarm. "My job," Ethan said. "Assessing the damage." "You can't just—" "I can, and I am." Ethan wedged the pry bar into the rotted section and pulled. The wood came away easily, crumbling into chunks that fell to the floor. And underneath, gleaming in the dim light, was a solid steel I-beam, completely intact. Ethan pulled out his flashlight and shone it across the metal surface. No rust, no corrosion, no damage of any kind. The steel was doing exactly what it was supposed to do, holding up the building. He turned to Calloway. "This beam is fine. The wood is rotted. The wood is cosmetic cladding. The steel is what matters." Ethan's voice was calm, factual. "This building isn't structurally unsafe. It needs maintenance, not an emergency closure." Calloway's face went red. "That's not for you to decide." "No, it's for the city inspector to decide. But I'm betting when we request a second inspection, they're going to find exactly what I just found." Ethan pulled out his phone and took photos of the exposed beam, the intact steel, the rotted cladding. "Which means your emergency eviction was based on false information." Lena stepped forward, her voice shaking slightly. "Which means fraud." The room went silent. Calloway stared at them, his expression shifting from anger to calculation. The movers had stopped working downstairs, sensing the tension. "You don't know what you're talking about," Calloway said finally. "Then prove me wrong." Ethan met his eyes. "Call the city. Request a new inspection. Right now." Calloway didn't move. "That's what I thought," Ethan said. He turned to Lena. "Get your lawyer on the phone. We're filing an emergency motion to stop this eviction." Lena was already dialing. "But The aftermath moved quickly. Lena's lawyer arrived within the hour, took one look at Ethan's photos, and immediately filed for an emergency hearing. The judge reviewed the evidence that afternoon and issued a temporary restraining order against Calloway, halting the auction and unfreezing Lena's accounts pending a full investigation. By the end of the week, the city had conducted a new inspection and confirmed what Ethan had found. The building was structurally sound. The emergency closure was rescinded, and Lena regained access to her gallery. Calloway tried to fight it, but the fraud was too obvious. His fake inspection report unraveled under scrutiny, and within days he was facing both civil and criminal charges. The Hart collection was safe. Ethan stood in the gallery on a Saturday morning, watching as Lena and Sophie unpacked crates and rehung paintings. The space was coming back to life, color and light filling the rooms again. Riley was there too, sitting cross-legged on the floor and sketching in a notebook Lena had given her. "Thank you," Lena said quietly, appearing beside him, "for everything. You already thanked me. I'll keep thanking you until it feels like enough." She looked around the gallery, her expression soft. "I thought I'd lost all of this, and then you just showed up. You would have figured it out on your own. Maybe, but I didn't have to because you were there." She turned to face him. "Why, Ethan? Really?" He was quiet for a moment, watching Riley draw. "Because nobody should have to fight alone," he said finally. "And because you reminded me that sometimes the right thing to do is just show up." Lena's eyes were bright. "I'm glad you did." They stood there together, the gallery humming with life around them, and for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt like maybe, just maybe, he didn't have to keep the world at arm's length. Maybe letting people in wasn't as dangerous as he'd thought. Maybe some things were worth the risk. The gallery reopened 3 weeks later with a reception that drew half of San Francisco's art community. Lena had transformed the space completely. The walls glowed with carefully positioned lighting, each painting hung with mathematical precision. Servers moved through the crowd with trays of wine and hors d'oeuvres, and soft jazz played from hidden speakers. It was elegant, sophisticated, and completely outside Ethan's comfort zone. He stood near the back wall in his only sport coat, hands in his pockets, watching the crowd with the wariness of someone who'd rather be anywhere else. Riley was with a babysitter tonight. This wasn't exactly a 7-year-old scene, and without her as a buffer, Ethan felt exposed. "You look miserable," Sophie said, appearing beside him with 2 glasses of wine. She offered him one. "I'm fine." "You're definitely not fine. You've been standing in the exact same spot for 20 minutes. She sipped her wine. "Not a fan of crowds." "Not particularly." "Then why did you come?" Ethan glanced across the room to where Lena was talking animatedly with a collector, her hands moving expressively as she described the painting between them. She wore a deep blue dress that somehow managed to be both professional and striking, her dark hair pulled back in a way that made her look even more confident than usual. "Your sister asked me to," he said simply. Sophie followed his gaze and smiled. "She did, didn't she? She said it was important." "It is. You saved this place, Ethan. People should know that." "I didn't save anything. I just looked at a beam." "You did a hell of a lot more than that." Sophie's voice went serious. Lena was ready to give up. "I've never seen her like that. Completely defeated. And then you showed up and just fixed everything." "I exposed a fraud. That's not the same as fixing—" "Ethan," Sophie cut him off gently, "take the compliment." He took a drink of wine instead, the taste sharp and unfamiliar on his tongue. He wasn't much of a drinker, but standing here doing nothing felt wrong, and at least holding the glass gave his hands something to do. Across the room, Lena caught his eye and smiled. Not the professional smile she was giving the collectors. This one was softer, more genuine. She excused herself from the conversation and made her way through the crowd toward him. "You came," she said, her voice warm with relief. "You asked." "I did, but I wasn't sure you actually would." She glanced at Sophie. "Mind if I steal him for a minute?" "He's all yours." Sophie winked and disappeared into the crowd. Lena touched Ethan's elbow lightly, guiding him toward a quieter corner near the stairwell. The noise of the reception faded slightly, replaced by the softer hum of conversation and music. "How does it feel?" Ethan asked, nodding toward the gallery. "Being back." "Surreal," Lena admitted. A month ago, I thought this was gone forever. Now it's like none of it ever happened. Except it did happen. Yeah. She looked around the space, her expression thoughtful. But maybe that's not a bad thing. I learned who I could count on when everything fell apart. That's worth knowing. And who's that? Sophie, my lawyer. A handful of artists who stuck by me even when it looked like I was finished. She met his eyes. And you. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. I just did what anyone would have done. No, you didn't. Most people would have turned us away at the door. You built us a room in one night and then went to war with a man who had every advantage. Her voice dropped. You didn't have to do any of that. You needed help. So do a lot of people. That doesn't mean they get it. Ethan didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. Lena seemed to understand. She let the silence sit for a moment before changing the subject. Riley doing okay? She's good. Asked about you yesterday, actually. Yeah? Lena's face brightened. What did she say? Wanted to know if you were coming back to the warehouse anytime soon. I think she misses having you and Sophie around. We miss her too. She's a great kid, Ethan. You're doing something right. I'm doing my best. It shows. Lena hesitated, then said, I've been meaning to talk to you about something. Okay. Sophie and I found a new apartment. We're moving in next week. Ethan nodded. He'd known this was coming. They couldn't stay in his workshop forever, and now that the gallery was back in business, there was no reason for them to. Still, the news settled in his chest with an unexpected weight. That's good, he said. You need your own space. We do, but... Lena paused, choosing her words carefully. I wanted you to know that staying with you these past few weeks, it meant more than just having a place to sleep. You gave us stability when everything else was chaos, and you did it without asking for anything in return. I didn't need anything in return. I know, that's what made it matter. She took a breath. So thank you for all of it. You're welcome. They stood there for a moment, the party continuing around them, and Ethan had the strange sense that something was ending. Not badly, just ending. Lena and Sophie would move into their new place, the gallery would keep running, and life would go back to normal. He'd return to his quiet routine with Riley, building furniture and avoiding complications. It was what he wanted, wasn't it? Lena, a voice called from the crowd, one of the collectors waving her over. We need you for a photo, Lena sighed. Duty calls. She touched Ethan's arm briefly. Don't leave yet, okay? I want to talk more later. Sure. She disappeared back into the crowd, and Ethan was alone again. He finished his wine, set the glass on a nearby table, and slipped out through the side exit before anyone could notice he was gone. The cool night air felt like relief. He walked back to his truck, hands in his pockets, trying to shake the strange restlessness that had settled over him. Everything had worked out the way it was supposed to. Lena had her gallery back. Calloway was facing charges, and the sisters were moving on with their lives. So why did it feel like he'd lost something? He didn't have an answer, and he wasn't sure he wanted one. Ethan climbed into his truck and drove home through the empty streets, the city lights blurring past like stars falling away. The following week passed in a familiar rhythm. Ethan worked on a custom bookshelf order for a client in Pacific Heights, spending long hours measuring, cutting, and assembling pieces with the precision he'd built his reputation on. Riley went to school, came home, did her homework, and occasionally asked when Lena and Sophie were coming to visit. They're busy with the gallery, Ethan told her. Maybe soon. You said that last time. Then maybe it'll be true this time. Riley gave him a look that said she didn't believe him, but she didn't push. She was good at reading his moods, even at 7, and she knew when to let things go. On Thursday evening, Ethan's phone rang while he was cleaning up the workshop. He didn't recognize the number, but he answered anyway. Ethan Walker. Mr. Walker, this is Patricia Chen from the San Francisco Building Department. Ethan straightened. Okay, I'm calling about the inspection you requested for the property at 847 Market Street, the Hart Collection Gallery. We've completed our follow-up investigation, and I wanted to inform you that we've found significant discrepancies in the original inspection report filed by Mr. Calloway's contractor. What kind of discrepancies? The kind that suggests the report was falsified. The inspector listed on the document claims he never conducted the inspection, and the damage described doesn't match our findings. We're recommending the case be referred to the district attorney's office for criminal investigation. Ethan felt a grim satisfaction settle in his chest. Good. I also wanted to thank you personally, Chen continued. If you hadn't brought this to our attention, we might never have caught it. Calloway could have used the same tactic on other tenants, just doing what needed to be done. Well, we appreciate it. If you're ever interested in consulting work, we could use someone with your eye for detail. Ethan thanked her and ended the call. He stood in the quiet workshop for a moment, letting the news sink in. Calloway was finished, the fraud was exposed, and there'd be consequences. Justice, he supposed, even if it felt slower than it should have been. He texted Lena. Building department called. Calloway's inspection report was fake. They're sending it to the DA. Her response came almost immediately. I know, they called me too. This is really over, isn't it? Yeah, it's over. There was a pause, then, can I come by tomorrow? I want to talk to you about something. Ethan stared at the message, curiosity mixing with something that felt dangerously close to hope. Sure. Afternoon work? Perfect. See you then. He pocketed his phone and went back to cleaning, but his mind was already somewhere else. Chut. Lena arrived the next afternoon carrying 2 cups of coffee and a folder tucked under her arm. She looked different, more relaxed maybe, or less guarded. She wore jeans and a sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders, and when she handed him one of the coffees, her smile was easy. Thanks for making time, she said. I've got time. Ethan took the coffee and gestured toward the workbench. What's in the folder? A business proposal. He raised an eyebrow. For what? Lena set the folder on the bench and opened it, revealing architectural sketches, floor plans, and financial projections. For this. Ethan leaned in, studying the documents. It took him a moment to understand what he was looking at. A commercial space, gutted and redesigned, with the front half configured as an art gallery and the back half as a woodworking studio. I don't understand, he said slowly. I found a new building, Lena explained. Bigger than the old gallery, better location, and the landlord's actually trustworthy. It's a 15-year lease with an option to buy. The front will be the new Hart collection, more exhibition space, a proper office, storage for inventory. And the back? That's for you. Ethan looked up sharply. What? A fully equipped woodworking studio, space for your tools, room to take on bigger projects, a separate entrance so you're not tied to gallery hours. You'd have complete autonomy. Lena's voice was calm, measured, like she'd rehearsed this. I'm offering you a partnership, Ethan. Equal investment, shared ownership of the building, separate operations but joint decision-making on property management. He stared at her. You're serious. Completely. Why? Because you're the reason I still have a business. Because I trust you. And because I think we'd work well together. She tapped the financial projections. The numbers make sense. Your furniture work brings in steady income, and the gallery has strong client relationships. We'd both benefit from shared overhead costs, and the building has enough space for both of us to grow. Ethan's mind was racing. A real studio, professional space, no more working out of a converted warehouse with limited room and constant noise from the neighboring businesses. It was everything he'd told himself he didn't need but had secretly wanted for years. What about Riley? He asked. I can't just pick up and move my whole life. The building's 10 minutes from your current place. Riley's school district doesn't change. Lena had clearly thought this through. And there's a loft space upstairs we could convert into an apartment if you wanted to live on site eventually, but that's optional, no pressure. Lena, I know it's a lot to think about, she said quickly, and I'm not asking for an answer right now. Take the folder, look at the numbers, visit the building. If you're not interested, that's fine, but I wanted you to know the offer's real. Ethan looked down at the plans again. The studio layout was perfect. Efficient use of space, proper ventilation, room for both power tools and handwork. Someone had put serious thought into this. You designed this yourself? He asked. Sophie helped, and I had an architect friend sketch it out. Lena's voice softened. But yeah, I designed it with you in mind. Something in Ethan's chest tightened. Why me? Because you're good at what you do. Because you're reliable. Because when everything fell apart, you were the one person who showed up without hesitation. She met his eyes. And because I like the idea of building something with someone I trust. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, his thoughts tangling around themselves. This was the kind of opportunity he'd stopped letting himself hope for. A chance to expand his business, to work in a real studio, to build a future that was more than just getting by. But it also meant taking a risk, trusting someone, letting his carefully controlled world get complicated. "Can I think about it?" he asked finally. "Of course. Take all the time you need. How long before you need an answer?" "I have to sign the lease by the end of the month, so 3 weeks? That's not a lot of time." "I know." Lena closed the folder and pushed it toward him. "But I'm hoping it's enough." Ethan picked up the folder, feeling the weight of it in his hands. "I'll look it over. That's all I'm asking." She finished her coffee and stood to leave, but paused at the door. "Ethan?" "Yeah?" "Whatever you decide, thank you for at least considering it. That means a lot." He nodded, and she left. The workshop felt suddenly very quiet. Ethan opened the folder again and started reading, his mind already running scenarios, calculating risks, weighing possibilities. By the time Riley came home from school, he'd gone through the documents twice, and the numbers kept coming back solid. It was a good offer. A great offer, even. The question wasn't whether it made financial sense, the question was whether he was ready to take the leap. That weekend, Ethan took Riley to see the building. It stood in a neighborhood that was halfway between industrial and residential. Old brick structures being slowly converted into mixed-use spaces, coffee shops opening next to auto repair garages, the kind of area that was changing but hadn't lost its character yet. The building itself was 3 stories, red brick like the old gallery, with tall windows and a corner entrance that faced the street. A faded sign above the door read, "Morrison Manufacturing Company," a remnant from whatever business had occupied the space decades ago. "This is it?" Riley asked, peering up at the facade. "This is it. It's big." "Yeah, it is." They walked around the perimeter and Ethan took mental notes. The structure looked solid. Good foundation, no visible settling, the brickwork intact. The windows were old but not broken. It needed work, but nothing catastrophic. Lena had given him a key to the main entrance, and he unlocked the door, pushing it open. The interior was exactly what he'd expected from the floor plans. A wide-open ground floor with high ceilings and exposed beams, natural light pouring through the windows. The front half was empty and waiting, clearly meant for the gallery. The back half had remnants of old machinery, anchor bolts in the concrete floor, electrical conduits running along the walls, but it was spacious, with plenty of room for his equipment. Riley ran ahead, her footsteps echoing in the empty space. "Dad, there's stairs!" "Don't go up there without me," Ethan called. He walked slowly through the space, imagining where his table saw would go, where he'd set up the workbenches, how he'd organize the lumber storage. It was easy to picture. Too easy. Riley came back down the stairs, her eyes wide with excitement. "There's a whole apartment up there. It's got windows and everything. That's the loft space. Are we going to live here?" "I don't know yet, kiddo." "Why not? It's way cooler than our place." Ethan smiled slightly. "It's more complicated than that." "Why?" "Because it means going into business with someone. That's a big decision." Riley tilted her head, considering this. "Is it Lena?" "Yeah. I like Lena. And Sophie." "I know you do." "So what's the problem?" Ethan crouched down to her level. "There's no problem. I just need to make sure it's the right choice for both of us." "It seems right to me," Riley said matter-of-factly. "You're always saying the warehouse is too small, and here you'd have all this space. Plus, Lena's nice. She showed me how to draw perspective that one time, remember?" "I remember." "And she likes you." Ethan blinked. "What makes you say that?" "She looks at you the same way you look at her." Heat crept up Ethan's neck. "Riley, I'm 7. Not stupid, Dad." She grinned. "It's okay. I think it's nice." Ethan straightened, suddenly very interested in examining the ceiling beams. "Come on, let's finish looking around." They explored the rest of the building together. The loft space that could become an apartment, the basement storage area, the alley entrance that would be perfect for lumber deliveries. Every detail confirmed what Ethan already knew. This was exactly what he needed. The only question was whether he was brave enough to take it. On Monday, Ethan called Lena. I looked at the building, he said without preamble. And? Her voice was carefully neutral. It's perfect. There was a pause. But? No but. It's perfect. The space works, the location's good, the numbers make sense. He took a breath. I'm in. You're in. Lena repeated it like she wasn't sure she'd heard correctly. Yeah, I want to do this. Ethan, are you sure? Because if you have any doubts, I'm sure. And he was. He'd spent the entire weekend thinking it through, running scenarios, weighing risks, and every path led to the same conclusion. This was the right move. When do we start? I'll call the landlord today. If you can meet with the lawyer this week to review the partnership agreement, we can sign the lease by Friday. Done. Okay. Lena's voice was bright with relief. Okay, this is really happening. Looks like it. Ethan? Yeah? Thank you for trusting me with this. You trusted me first, he said simply. Seemed only fair to return the favor. After they hung up, Ethan sat in the quiet workshop, letting the reality of what he'd just agreed to settle over him. He was going into business with Lena Hart. He was leaving the warehouse he'd called home for nearly a decade. He was taking a risk on something bigger than himself. It should have terrified him. Instead, it felt like the first truly right decision he'd made in years. The next 2 weeks blurred together in a rush of meetings, paperwork, and planning. Ethan met with Lena's lawyer to review the partnership agreement, a straightforward 50-50 split on ownership and expenses, with clear boundaries around their separate operations. He signed the papers without hesitation. The lease was finalized on a rainy Friday afternoon, and Lena handed him a key to the building with a smile that looked almost nervous. We're really doing this, she said. We really are. No turning back now. Good. They stood in the empty building together, rain drumming against the windows, and Ethan felt something shift. This wasn't just a business arrangement anymore. This was a partnership in every sense of the word. Two people building something together, trusting each other to show up and do the work. I'll start moving my equipment next week, Ethan said. Should have the studio operational within a month. And I'll get the gallery side ready for the reopening. Lena looked around the space, her expression thoughtful. This is going to be good, Ethan. I can feel it. Yeah, he agreed. I think it will be. Sophie arrived then, carrying paint samples and fabric swatches, and the conversation shifted to logistics and design choices. Ethan listened as the sisters debated color schemes and lighting configurations, their energy infectious. Riley would have loved this, he thought, and maybe, once they were settled, she'd get to be part of it too. For the first time in a long time, Ethan let himself imagine a future that was more than just survival. A future with space to grow, people to trust, and possibilities he hadn't dared to hope for. It felt fragile and uncertain and terrifying. It also felt like coming home. 3 weeks later, Ethan stood in his new studio, surrounded by half-assembled workbenches and stacks of lumber waiting to be organized. The space was coming together slowly but surely. He'd installed proper dust collection, wired in dedicated circuits for his power tools, and built custom storage racks that maximized the vertical space. It was functional, efficient, and entirely his. Through the doorway that connected his studio to the gallery, he could hear Lena and Sophie discussing wall placements for the upcoming exhibition. Their voices carried a lightness he hadn't heard during those first desperate days in his warehouse. Riley sat cross-legged on the floor, sketching in the notebook Lena had given her. She'd insisted on coming to help, even though her version of helping mostly involved asking questions and drawing pictures of the tools. Dad, when are we moving into the apartment upstairs? Ethan looked up from the workbench he was assembling. Probably next month. We need to finish the renovations first. Can I paint my room? What color? Purple, or maybe blue. I haven't decided yet. Let me know when you do. Riley went back to her drawing, and Ethan returned to his work. The rhythm of it was familiar: measure, cut, assemble, repeat. But the context was different now. He wasn't alone in his warehouse anymore, working in isolation. He was part of something larger, something collaborative. It should have felt restrictive. Instead, it felt like freedom. Lena appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a rag. How's it going in here? Good. Almost done with the main workbench. Need any help? I've got it. How's the gallery? Coming together. We'll be ready for the opening next month. She stepped into the studio, looking around at the organized chaos. This is going to be amazing when it's finished. That's the plan. She smiled, and Ethan felt that now familiar tightness in his chest, the one that showed up whenever she was around, the one he'd stopped trying to ignore. Riley, want to come help me hang some paintings? Lena asked. Riley jumped up immediately. Yes! They disappeared into the gallery together, leaving Ethan alone with his thoughts and his tools. He finished assembling the workbench, tested its stability, and stepped back to admire the result. Solid, level, built to last. Not a bad metaphor for what he was building here. Not bad at all. The grand opening of the new Heart Collection came on a Saturday in late November, and the entire neighborhood seemed to show up. Ethan watched from the doorway of his studio as the gallery filled with people. Collectors in expensive coats, artists in paint-splattered jeans, curious neighbors who'd seen the renovation happening and wanted to see the results. Lena moved through the crowd with practiced grace, introducing artists to potential buyers, answering questions about the pieces on display, her confidence fully restored. She'd transformed the space into something remarkable. The walls glowed with warm lighting that made each painting feel like it existed in its own world. Strategic placement created natural flow through the exhibition, guiding visitors from piece to piece without feeling forced. It was professional, elegant, and completely Lena. Sophie stood near the entrance, greeting guests and handing out programs. She caught Ethan's eye and waved him over. "You're not hiding back there all night," she said when he approached. "I'm not hiding, I'm observing." Same thing. She pressed a glass of champagne into his hand. "Lena wants you to meet some people, important people who might want custom furniture." "I'm fine without—" "Ethan," Sophie's voice went serious, "you're part of this now. That means showing up even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable." He wanted to argue, but she was right. He'd signed on to be Lena's partner, and that meant more than just working in the back studio. It meant being present. "Fine," he said. "But I'm not making small talk about art theory." "Nobody's asking you to." Sophie grinned. "Just be yourself. That's usually enough." She steered him into the crowd, introducing him to a rotating cast of people whose names he immediately forgot. A tech executive interested in commissioning a dining table, an interior designer looking for someone who could do custom built-ins, an architect who needed furniture for a model home. Ethan took their cards, answered their questions, and felt increasingly out of his depth. Then Lena appeared at his elbow, her hand touching his arm lightly. "Can I borrow you for a second?" "Please," Ethan said, grateful for the rescue. She led him away from the crowd toward a quieter corner near the windows. Outside, the street was dark except for the glow of streetlights and the occasional passing car. "You doing okay?" she asked. "I'm not great with crowds." "I know, but you're doing well." She smiled. 3 potential clients in one night, that's not bad. They probably won't follow through. They will. You're good at what you do, Ethan. People recognize that. He shifted uncomfortably. "How are you holding up?" "Honestly, I'm exhausted." Lena leaned against the window frame, and for the first time that evening, her professional mask slipped. "This is what I wanted. The gallery thriving, new space, fresh start, but it's a lot." "You don't have to do it alone." "I know, that's still new for me." She looked at him. "I've spent 6 years building this business by myself, making every decision, handling every crisis, carrying all the weight. And now you're here, and Sophie's more involved, and I'm supposed to trust that I don't have to manage everything solo anymore." "You don't," Ethan said simply. "Easier said than done." "Most things worth doing are," Lena laughed softly. "When did you get wise?" "I'm not wise, I just know what it's like to think you have to handle everything yourself." He thought of the years after his ex-wife left, raising Riley alone, convinced that asking for help was the same as admitting failure. It's exhausting and unnecessary. "So what changed?" "You showed up at my door soaking wet and desperate," Ethan said, "and I realized that sometimes people need help, and that's not weakness. It's just being human." Lena was quiet for a moment, her eyes searching his face. "You're different than I remember from high school. We both are." "Fair point." She glanced back at the gallery, where the party was still going strong. "I should get back out there." "Yeah." But neither of them moved. The moment stretched, and Ethan became acutely aware of how close they were standing, how her hand was still resting lightly on his arm, how her eyes held something he couldn't quite name. Then Sophie's voice cut through the quiet. "Lena, the reporter from the Chronicle is here." The spell broke. Lena stepped back, smoothing her dress. "Duty calls." "Well, go," Ethan said. "I'll be fine." She disappeared into the crowd, and Ethan stayed by the window, watching the party unfold with a strange mix of contentment and restlessness. This was what success looked like. People celebrating, business thriving, partnerships working. It should have been enough. But something still felt incomplete. He couldn't quite put his finger on what. The party wound down around 10. The last guest trickled out, and Sophie started collecting empty glasses while Lena walked the reporter to the door. Ethan helped clean up, stacking chairs and breaking down the serving tables with the efficiency of someone who'd worked construction jobs in his early 20s. "You don't have to do this," Lena said when she returned. "We can hire a cleaning crew." "I'm already here. Might as well help." "Suit yourself." They worked in comfortable silence, the three of them moving through the space with practiced coordination. Within an hour, the gallery was back to its pristine state, ready for regular hours on Monday. Sophie yawned. "I'm heading home. Good work tonight, both of you." "Drive safe," Lena said. After Sophie left, Ethan and Lena stood in the empty gallery, the overhead lights casting long shadows across the polished floor. "Thank you for tonight," Lena said quietly. "For showing up, for meeting people, for being here. I told you I was in. That includes the uncomfortable parts. Still, it means something." She hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Do you regret it? Saying yes to the partnership?" Ethan considered the question. "No, do you?" "Not even a little." Lena smiled. "I was just checking." "Why?" "Because you looked miserable for most of the party, and I wanted to make sure you weren't having second thoughts." I looked miserable because I hate networking, not because I regret being here." He met her eyes. "This is the best decision I've made in years, Lena. I'm not going anywhere." Something shifted in her expression, relief maybe, or gratitude. "Good, because I'm really glad you're here." "Me too." They stood there in the quiet gallery, and Ethan felt that familiar pull again, the one that showed up whenever Lena was around. It would be so easy to cross the distance between them, to find out if this thing building between them was real or just proximity and gratitude. But he didn't move. There was too much at stake. Their partnership, their businesses, the stability they were both building. Complicating it with feelings that might not last seemed reckless. So instead, he said goodnight and went back to his studio, leaving Lena standing alone in the gallery. It was the smart choice. It just didn't feel like the right one. The weeks that followed settled into a new rhythm. Ethan worked in his studio during the day, building furniture and taking on commissions from the contacts he'd made at the opening. Riley started third grade and spent her afternoons doing homework at a desk Ethan had built for her in the corner of the studio. Lena ran the gallery with Sophie's help, hosting exhibitions and meeting with clients while the business grew steadily. They saw each other daily, but kept their interactions professional. Morning coffee in the shared kitchen area, brief updates on building maintenance, occasional collaboration when a client wanted furniture specifically designed to complement artwork Lena was selling. It was working exactly the way it was supposed to. Ethan told himself that was enough. One afternoon in early December, he was working on a cherry wood dresser when he heard raised voices from the gallery. He set down his chisel and walked to the connecting door, listening. "I don't care what your contract says." The voice was male, aggressive. "That painting is mine." "Mr. Brennan, I've explained this twice already." Lena's voice was calm but strained. "The artist withdrew the piece from sale. You didn't complete the purchase in the agreed time frame, and they have every right to reclaim it." "I put down a deposit, which we've already refunded in full. I have the bank transfer confirmation right here." "This is breach of contract. I'll sue." Ethan pushed through the door and found Lena standing behind the gallery desk, facing a red-faced man in an expensive suit. The man was leaning over the desk aggressively, his body language designed to intimidate. Lena's expression was controlled, but Ethan could see the tension in her shoulders. "Is there a problem?" Ethan asked, his voice even. The man turned. "Who the hell are you?" "I'm her partner." and you need to step back from the desk. This is none of your business. Actually, it is. This is my building, too. Ethan moved closer, positioning himself between the man and Lena. And I'm asking you nicely to step back. Brennan's eyes narrowed. Or what? Or I'll call the police and have you removed for trespassing. Ethan pulled out his phone. Your choice. For a long moment, Brennan looked like he might escalate. Then he seemed to recalculate, his aggression deflating slightly. This isn't over, he said to Lena. Yes, it is, she replied calmly. If you contact us again, I'll file a restraining order. Now please leave. Brennan grabbed his coat and stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Ethan waited until he was gone before turning to Lena. You okay? I'm fine, but her hands were shaking slightly as she set down the papers she'd been holding. He's been calling all week, demanding we honor a sale that never actually went through. I thought if I met with him in person, I could resolve it. You should have called me. I didn't think... She stopped, took a breath. I didn't think he'd get physical. He didn't, but he was thinking about it. Ethan had seen enough aggressive posturing to recognize the signs. Next time someone makes you uncomfortable, you tell me. Immediately. Ethan, I know you can handle yourself, but you don't have to anymore. That's what partners are for. Lena looked at him for a long moment, something complicated moving behind her eyes. Thank you. Don't mention it. No, really. Thank you for showing up. Again. Her voice went softer. You have a habit of doing that. Someone's got to. She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. I should call my lawyer, make sure Brennan can't actually sue. Good idea. I'll stick around until you're done. You don't have to. I'm sticking around, Ethan said firmly. Lena didn't argue. She made the call while Ethan worked on the dresser, his ear tuned to the conversation happening in the gallery. The lawyer confirmed what Lena had already told Brennan. The contract was void, the refund completed the transaction, and any further harassment could result in legal action. When she hung up, Lena came into the studio and sank into the chair Riley usually occupied. Crisis averted, she said. For now. Always the optimist. Just realistic. Ethan set down his tools and leaned against the workbench. You get a lot of clients like that? Not many. Most people are reasonable. But every so often, you get someone who thinks throwing their weight around will get them what they want. She rubbed her temples. It's exhausting. Running a business usually is. Speaking from experience? Some. I've had my share of difficult clients over the years. Ethan crossed his arms. Had a guy once who wanted me to rebuild an antique desk, got angry when I told him the wood was too damaged to save, and threatened to leave negative reviews on every platform he could find. What did you do? Showed him photos of the damage, explained why restoration wasn't possible, and offered to build him a replica instead using the same wood species and joinery techniques. Ethan shrugged. He calmed down once he realized I wasn't trying to cheat him. Sometimes people just need to be heard. And when they don't calm down, then you set boundaries and stick to them, like you just did. Lena was quiet for a moment, watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. You're good at this. At what? Staying calm when things get tense, not escalating. She smiled slightly. It's a useful skill. Comes from years of dealing with a strong-willed 7-year-old. Riley's great. She is, but she's also stubborn as hell and doesn't back down when she thinks she's right. I've learned to pick my battles. Sounds familiar, Lena said. Sophie was like that growing up. Still is, actually. You two close? Very, especially after our parents died. Lena's voice went quiet. It was just us for a long time. She was 19, I was 24. We had to figure everything out on our own. Estate stuff, bills, college tuition. The gallery was my way of building something stable for both of us. Ethan hadn't known that. I'm sorry. It was a long time ago. We're okay now. She straightened in the chair, but it made me protective of what we built, which is why losing the old gallery felt like failing her. You didn't fail anyone. It felt like it at the time. Lena met his eyes. And then you showed up and reminded me that asking for help isn't the same as giving up. You would have figured it out eventually. Maybe, but I'm glad I didn't have to. They sat in the comfortable silence of the studio, surrounded by wood shavings and half-finished projects, and Ethan felt that pull again, stronger this time, harder to ignore. He stood abruptly. I should get back to work. This dresser isn't going to finish itself. Right. Of course. Lena stood too, smoothing her skirt. Thanks again for earlier. Anytime. She left, and Ethan went back to sanding, trying to focus on the grain of the wood instead of the way Lena had looked at him just now. It was getting harder to pretend he didn't feel something, and even harder to convince himself that acting on it would be a mistake. Riley noticed the change first. She'd always been observant, but lately she'd started asking pointed questions that made Ethan uncomfortable. Do you like Lena? She asked one evening while they were making dinner in the loft apartment they'd finally finished renovating. Of course I like her. She's my business partner. That's not what I mean. Then what do you mean? Do you like her? Riley emphasized the words in that particular way kids did when they were trying to sound grown up. Ethan focused very intently on chopping vegetables. Where's this coming from? You look at her a lot, and she looks at you. And you both smile when you think the other person isn't watching. Riley hopped up on the counter, swinging her legs. It's obvious. Riley, I'm just saying it would be okay if you did. Like her, I mean. Her voice went serious. I know you loved Mom, and she left, and that was hard. But that doesn't mean you can't like someone else now. Ethan set down the knife. That's pretty wise for a third grader. I read a lot. I've noticed. So do you. Like her. He could have deflected, changed the subject, shut down the conversation. But Riley deserved honesty, even when it was complicated. Yeah, he admitted. I do. Then why don't you tell her? Because it's not that simple. We work together. We're building something important. If I tell her how I feel and she doesn't feel the same way, it could ruin everything. What if she does feel the same way? That might be even more complicated. Riley frowned. Why? Because mixing business and personal feelings can get messy, and I don't want to risk what we've built. So you're just going to pretend you don't like her. I'm going to focus on being a good partner and a good father. The rest doesn't matter. Riley looked at him with an expression far too knowing for her age. That sounds lonely. I'm not lonely. I have you. That's not the same, and you know it. She hopped off the counter. I'm just saying, Dad, life's too short to be scared. She left him standing in the kitchen, her words echoing in his head. Life's too short to be scared. When had his daughter gotten so smart? And when had he become such a coward? The answer to that second question was easy. The day his ex-wife walked out, proving that letting someone in meant giving them the power to leave. He'd built walls after that, told himself that protecting Riley was enough, that he didn't need anything more. But maybe Riley was right. Maybe he was just scared. The realization didn't change anything. Ethan went back to chopping vegetables, made dinner, helped Riley with her homework, and went to bed telling himself that keeping things professional was still the right choice. But sleep didn't come easily that night, and when it did, he dreamed of Lena standing in the gallery, looking at him the way she had after Brennan left, like he was something worth trusting, worth leaning on, worth keeping close. He woke up knowing he was in trouble. The holiday season brought a surge of business to both the gallery and the studio. Lena hosted a winter exhibition featuring local artists, and Ethan took on multiple custom orders for people who wanted handcrafted gifts. They were both working long hours, crossing paths in the shared kitchen late at night when they'd come up for coffee. Still at it? Lena asked one evening, finding Ethan at the counter waiting for the pot to brew. Client wants a jewelry box finished by Christmas. I'm behind schedule. Join the club. I have 3 consultations tomorrow and I still need to finish the catalog for the January show. She leaned against the counter beside him, close enough that he could smell her perfume, something light and floral that reminded him of early spring. We're quite a pair, he said. That we are. The coffee maker beeped and Ethan poured 2 cups without asking, handing one to Lena. She accepted it with a tired smile. Thanks. No problem. They stood there in the quiet kitchen, the building settling around them with the creaks and groans of old brick and timber. Outside, the city hummed with late-night traffic and distant sirens. Can I ask you something? Lena said after a moment. Sure. Do you ever regret how things turned out? With your ex-wife, I mean. The question caught him off guard. That's random. I know, but I was thinking about it earlier, about how we both ended up here because of things falling apart elsewhere. Your marriage, my old gallery. Sometimes I wonder if we're building something new or just running from what broke. Ethan considered that. I don't regret how it turned out. I regret that Riley had to go through it. But the marriage ending? No. We weren't right for each other. Staying together would have been worse. Do you think you'll try again? With someone else? I don't know. He looked at her. Do you? You haven't mentioned dating since I've known you. I haven't had time. Between rebuilding the business and helping Sophie, and now this, she gestured around the kitchen. There's not exactly room for romance. You could make room if you wanted to. Could you? The question hung between them, heavy with implication. Maybe, Ethan said carefully, if it was the right person. What would make someone the right person? Someone I trust. Someone who shows up when things get hard. Someone who doesn't need me to be anything other than what I am. He met her eyes. Someone who makes me want to be brave. Lena's breath caught. Ethan, his phone buzzed, shattering the moment. He pulled it out and saw Sophie's name on the screen. Sorry, he said. I should take this. Of course, he answered, turning slightly away. Sophie, everything okay? Yeah, sorry to bother you so late. I just wanted to confirm that you're still available to help move that sculpture tomorrow morning. The artist is bringing it by at 9. Right. Yeah, I'll be there. Great, thanks. He hung up and turned back to Lena, but the moment had passed. She was looking at her phone now, scrolling through emails with a distracted expression. I should get back to work, she said without looking up. Yeah, me too. They left the kitchen together, walking in silence to the point where the hallway split, one direction leading to the gallery, the other to his studio. Good night, Ethan. Good night. He watched her walk away, coffee cup in hand, and felt the weight of all the words left unsaid. Life's too short to be scared. Riley's voice echoed in his head, but Ethan pushed it aside and went back to work on the jewelry box, his hands moving through familiar motions while his mind spun in circles. Tomorrow, he told himself, tomorrow he'd figure out what to do about these feelings that wouldn't go away. But tomorrow came and went, and nothing changed. And the day after that, and the day after that. And Ethan kept building furniture and avoiding the truth, while Lena kept running the gallery and pretending she hadn't asked him what makes someone the right person. They were both too careful, too scared, too convinced that protecting what they'd built meant keeping their distance. They were both wrong, but neither of them knew it yet. Christmas arrived with unexpected snow, rare for San Francisco, but perfect for the quiet stillness that had settled over the building. The gallery was closed for the holiday, and Ethan had given himself a break from work to spend the day with Riley. They decorated the loft apartment with lights and a small tree Riley had insisted on choosing herself, and now she sat on the floor surrounded by wrapping paper, examining the new art supplies Lena had dropped off the night before. She didn't have to get me anything, Riley said, turning over a set of professional-grade colored pencils. She wanted to, Ethan replied from the kitchen where he was attempting to make pancakes without burning them. You've been helping her in the gallery a lot. She appreciates it. I like helping. The artists are cool, and Lena explains things in a way that makes sense. Riley looked up. Did you get her anything? Ethan flipped a pancake with more force than necessary. I built her a display stand for the gallery. Custom piece, walnut with brass hardware. That's not really a present, Dad. That's work. It's a thoughtful piece of work. Riley gave him a look that said she knew exactly what he was avoiding. You should have gotten her something personal. We're business partners, Riles. We don't do personal gifts. That's dumb. Language. It's still dumb, she said, softer this time. She got me personal gifts, and she made you those cookies last week, the ones you said were the best thing you'd ever tasted. Ethan had said that, and he'd meant it. Lena had shown up at his studio door with a tin of homemade gingerbread, claiming she'd made too many and didn't want them to go to waste. He'd eaten half the tin in one sitting. That was different, he said. How? It just was. Riley went back to her art supplies, shaking her head in that way that made her seem much older than 8. Ethan finished the pancakes and called her to the table, grateful for the change of subject. They spent the morning watching holiday movies and building a complicated puzzle Riley had received from Sophie. Around noon, Ethan's phone buzzed with a text from Lena. "Merry Christmas. Hope you and Riley are having a good day." He stared at the message for longer than necessary before typing back, "You too. Thanks again for the art supplies. Riley loves them. I'm glad. She's talented. Thought she deserved good tools." Ethan set the phone down, but it buzzed again almost immediately. "If you're not busy later, Sophie and I are making dinner. Nothing fancy, but there's plenty if you want to join us." Riley looked up from the puzzle. "Who is it?" "Lena. She's inviting us to dinner." "Can we go?" Ethan hesitated. Spending Christmas evening with Lena felt dangerously close to crossing a line he'd been carefully maintaining. But Riley was already looking at him with hopeful eyes, and he didn't have a good reason to say no. "What time?" he texted back. 6. Loft apartment above the gallery. Bring Riley. Bring yourself. That's the whole guest list. We'll be there." Riley cheered, and Ethan told himself this was just neighbors being neighborly, nothing more complicated than that. He almost believed it. They arrived at Lena's apartment just before 6. Riley carrying a bottle of wine Ethan had grabbed from the corner store and a plate of the cookies he'd been hoarding from Lena's earlier batch. The loft space was smaller than Ethan's, but beautifully decorated. Sophie's influence, probably, with its warm colors and carefully chosen artwork. Lena opened the door wearing jeans and a soft sweater, her hair down around her shoulders, looking more relaxed than Ethan had seen her in weeks. "You came," she said, smiling. "We came," Riley confirmed, pushing past Ethan to hand over the wine and cookies. "Dad wanted to bring these back because he said they were too good to keep to himself." Ethan felt heat creep up his neck. "Riley, that's sweet," Lena said, her eyes sparkling with amusement. "Come in. Sophie's in the kitchen pretending she knows how to cook." "I heard that," Sophie's voice called from deeper in the apartment. The space smelled like roasted vegetables and something savory that made Ethan's stomach remind him he'd only eaten pancakes all day. Riley immediately gravitated toward the kitchen, asking if she could help, and Ethan found himself alone with Lena in the living area. "Your place looks great," he said. "Thanks. Sophie did most of the decorating. I'm terrible at that kind of thing." Lena gestured toward the couch. "Sit. Can I get you something to drink?" "I'm good for now." She sat beside him, close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her. Through the doorway, they could hear Riley and Sophie laughing about something in the kitchen. "Thank you for coming," Lena said quietly. "I wasn't sure you would." "Why not?" "Because we've been dancing around each other for weeks, and I thought maybe spending Christmas together would feel like too much." Ethan turned to look at her, surprised by the directness. "You noticed that?" "Of course I noticed. I'm observant, Ethan. It's part of my job." She smiled, but there was something vulnerable in it. "And I'm tired of pretending I haven't." "Lena, say?" "Let me finish." She took a breath. "I know we agreed to keep things professional. I know mixing business with personal feelings is risky, but I can't keep acting like I don't feel something when I'm around you. And I don't think you can either." Ethan's heart was hammering against his ribs. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I like you. Not just as a partner or a friend, but as someone I think about when you're not around. Someone who makes me want to be braver than I usually am." Her voice was steady despite the weight of what she was admitting. "And I think you feel the same way, but you're too careful to say it." He should have denied it. Should have reminded her about all the rational reasons they needed to maintain distance. Should have protected what they'd built by keeping his feelings locked away where they couldn't do damage. Instead, he said, "You're right." "About which part?" "All of it." Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, and felt something inside him shift. "I do feel the same way. I have for a while now, but I've been scared of what happens if we try this and it doesn't work." "What if it does work?" "That scares me even more." Lena reached for his hand, her fingers lacing through his. "I'm scared too. But I'm more scared of spending the next year working 10 feet away from you and never knowing what we could have been." From the kitchen, Sophie called out, "Dinner's ready!" Ethan squeezed Lena's hand. "We should talk about this. Really talk about it." "After dinner," she agreed. "After dinner." They stood, still holding hands, and walked toward the kitchen together. Riley looked up as they entered, and her eyes went immediately to their joined hands. Her face split into a grin so wide it threatened to break her face in half. "Finally," she muttered, just loud enough for Ethan to hear. Sophie caught the interaction and raised her eyebrows at Lena, who just smiled and shrugged. Dinner was chaotic and perfect. Sophie had made a roast that was slightly overdone but still delicious, and Riley entertained them with stories from school that had everyone laughing. The conversation flowed easily, shifting from art to woodworking to Riley's ambitious plan to build a treehouse in the non-existent backyard. "We don't have a backyard," Ethan pointed out. "Then we'll get one," Riley said matter-of-factly. "That's not how real estate works, kiddo." "It could be." Lena caught Ethan's eye across the table, and something warm passed between them, an understanding that this, right here, felt like family in a way that had nothing to do with blood and everything to do with choice. After dinner, Riley and Sophie settled in to watch a movie while Ethan helped Lena clean up. They worked in comfortable silence, washing dishes and putting away leftovers, until the kitchen was spotless and they'd run out of tasks to delay the conversation they both knew was coming. Lena dried her hands on a towel and turned to face him. So, Ethan echoed, "we should probably figure out what happens next." "Yeah." They moved to the small balcony off the kitchen, barely big enough for two people, but private. The city spread out below them, lights twinkling in the cold December air. Snow had started falling again, soft flakes drifting down through the streetlights. Lena leaned against the railing. "I meant what I said earlier, about liking you." "I know." Ethan stood beside her, their shoulders almost touching. "And I meant what I said too, about being scared. So where does that leave us?" "I don't know." He turned to face her fully. "I spent the last 6 years raising Riley alone and telling myself that was enough, that I didn't need anything more complicated than being a good father and running a decent business. And then you showed up, and suddenly everything I thought I wanted seemed small. Is that a bad thing?" "I don't know yet." He reached for her hand again, finding it already reaching for his. "But I know I don't want to keep pretending I don't feel this, whatever this is." "Then don't." Lena stepped closer, closing the distance between them until there was barely any space left. "Ethan, I'm not asking for guarantees or promises. I'm just asking if you're willing to try." He looked down at her, at the woman who'd appeared at his door desperate and soaking wet, who'd trusted him enough to let him help, who'd offered him a partnership that had changed his entire life. The woman who made him want to be braver than he usually was. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I'm willing to try." Lena smiled, and then she was kissing him, soft and tentative at first, then deeper when he responded. His hands found her waist, pulling her closer, and she made a small sound of surprise that turned into something warmer. The kiss tasted like wine and possibility, like taking a leap and trusting someone would catch you. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lena rested her forehead against his. "That was—" "Yeah," Ethan agreed. "We should probably set some ground rules about work and personal stuff." "Probably. And we should tell Riley and Sophie. Riley already knows. She figured it out weeks ago." Lena laughed. "Of course she did. She's terrifyingly perceptive." "Gets it from her mother," Ethan said, then froze. "I mean, my ex-wife was—" "That came out wrong." "It's okay." Lena touched his face gently. "I'm not going to fall apart every time you mention your past. We've both got history. That's part of what makes this real." Ethan kissed her again, slower this time, savoring it. When they went back inside, Sophie took one look at them and grinned. "About damn time," she said. Riley just gave Ethan a thumbs up from the couch, not even bothering to hide her satisfaction. The rest of the evening passed in a comfortable blur. They watched the end of the movie together, Riley eventually falling asleep against Ethan's shoulder while Lena sat on his other side, her hand resting on his knee. It felt natural in a way that should have terrified him, but instead just felt right. Around 10, Ethan carried Riley back to their apartment, Lena walking with them through the quiet building. At his door, she stopped. "So we're really doing this?" she asked. "We're really doing this?" "Okay," she smiled. "Good." "Good," he echoed. She kissed him one more time, quick and sweet, then disappeared down the hallway toward her own apartment. Ethan watched her go, Riley stirring slightly in his arms. "Dad?" she mumbled sleepily. Yeah, kiddo? I told you life's too short to be scared. You were right. I usually am. He carried her inside and got her settled in bed, her new art supplies already scattered across her desk from earlier. When he finally crawled into his own bed, Ethan stared at the ceiling and tried to process what had just happened. He'd spent 6 years building walls, convinced that protecting himself and Riley meant keeping everyone else at a distance. And in one evening, Lena had walked through those walls like they were made of paper. It should have felt dangerous. Instead, it felt like coming home. The next morning, Ethan woke to his phone buzzing with a text from Lena. Coffee in the shared kitchen? We should talk about the ground rules we mentioned. Give me 20 minutes, he replied. He found her waiting in the kitchen, 2 cups already poured and a notepad on the table between them. She'd clearly been awake for a while, her hair still damp from a shower. You made a list, Ethan observed, sitting down across from her. I make lists for everything. You know this about me. Fair point. She slid the notepad toward him. I was thinking about what we discussed last night, and I wanted to make sure we're on the same page before things get complicated. Ethan scanned the list. It was thorough, covering everything from how they'd handle disagreements about the business to what they'd tell clients and how they'd maintain professional boundaries during work hours. At the bottom, underlined twice, was a single sentence. Riley's well-being comes first, always. You put Riley at the top of the priority list, he said quietly. Of course I did. She's the most important person in your life. If this doesn't work out between us, I don't want her caught in the middle. Lena's voice was serious. Whatever happens with us, I want to make sure she's protected. Ethan felt something tighten in his chest, the realization that Lena understood exactly what mattered most to him and was already planning around it. Thank you, he said. Don't thank me for basic decency. It's not basic, it's thoughtful. He picked up a pen and added something to the list. Honesty, even when it's uncomfortable. Lena read it and nodded. Agreed. No pretending everything's fine if it's not. And no letting business disagreements bleed into personal stuff. Or vice versa. She added that to the list. What about telling people? Sophie and Riley already know. We should probably tell clients we're in a relationship just to be transparent. But we don't make a big deal out of it. We're still professionals first. Exactly. They worked through the rest of the list together, adding and revising until they had something that felt solid. By the time they were finished, Ethan's coffee was cold and Lena had filled 3 full pages with notes. This feels very formal for a relationship that's less than 12 hours old, he said. We're building something that matters. I want to do it right. Lena looked at him across the table. Is this too much? Be honest. No. I actually like it. It makes me feel like we're taking this seriously. We are. At least I am. So am I. She reached across the table and took his hand. Then I think we're going to be okay. The weeks following Christmas settled into a new normal. Ethan and Lena navigated their relationship with the same careful attention they gave to their businesses, taking things slow, communicating constantly, and making sure Riley felt secure in the changes happening around her. Riley, for her part, seemed thrilled. She'd immediately started referring to Lena as her almost stepmom, which Ethan had to gently correct even though Lena found it charming. Sophie appointed herself as the unofficial relationship supervisor, offering unsolicited advice and occasionally reminding them to actually go on dates instead of just working in the same building. You two need to leave this place occasionally, she said one afternoon, finding them both in Ethan's studio reviewing furniture designs for an upcoming gallery show. Go to dinner, see a movie, do normal couple things. We're busy, Lena protested. You're always busy. That's not an excuse. She's right, Ethan admitted. When's the last time you did something just for fun? Lena thought about it. I honestly can't remember. That's tragic, Sophie said. I'm making you a reservation for Friday night, both of you. No arguments. True to her word, Sophie booked them a table at a small Italian restaurant across town and volunteered to watch Riley for the evening. Ethan found himself actually nervous as Friday approached, which seemed ridiculous given that he'd been spending nearly every day with Lena for months. It's just dinner, Lena said when he mentioned it Thursday night. They were in her apartment, sitting on the couch while she went through paperwork, and he sketched design ideas for a client commission. I know. So why do you look terrified? Because this is our first real date. Everything up until now has been work adjacent or happening in the building. This is different. Lena set down her papers and turned to face him. Ethan, we've already done the hard part. We decided to try this despite all the rational reasons not to. Going to dinner is the easy part. You say that now. I mean it. She kissed him lightly. Besides, Sophie will murder us both if we cancel. Good point. Friday evening arrived clear and cold. Ethan changed clothes 3 times before settling on dark jeans and a button-down shirt that Riley insisted made him look fancy but not trying too hard. Lena met him at the truck wearing a dress he'd never seen before, deep green and elegant, and he had to remind himself how to breathe. You look beautiful, he said. You clean up pretty well yourself. They drove across the city making small talk about gallery business and upcoming projects. But once they were seated at the restaurant with wine glasses in hand and candles flickering between them, the conversation shifted into something more personal. Can I ask you something I've been wondering about? Lena said. Sure. What made you say yes? To the partnership, I mean. You could have helped me with Callaway and then sent us on our way. But you didn't. Ethan considered the question. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure. Part of it was practical. The offer made financial sense, and I needed better workspace. But mostly I think I was tired of playing it safe, tired of keeping my world small because it felt manageable. He met her eyes. You showed up and reminded me that sometimes the best things happen when you take a risk. I'm glad you did. Take the risk, I mean. Me too. What about Riley? Was she part of the decision? Riley was the whole decision. Everything I do is about making sure she's okay, that she has stability and opportunities and a father who shows up for her. Ethan's voice softened. Her mother leaving devastated her, even if she was too young to fully understand it at the time. I needed to prove that I wouldn't do the same thing, that I'd be there no matter what. You've done that, Lena said quietly. She knows she can count on you. I hope so. I know so. I see how she looks at you, Ethan. That kid worships you. She's pretty great. She really is. Lena paused, then said, Can I ask about your ex-wife? You don't talk about her much. Not much to say. We got married young, had Riley, realized we wanted completely different lives. She chose to leave rather than figure out how to make it work. Ethan shrugged. It hurt at the time, but honestly, it was probably the best thing for everyone. We would have made each other miserable if we'd stayed together. Do you still talk to her? Birthday cards for Riley, Christmas calls. That's about it. She moved to Portland, started a whole new life. Riley sees her maybe twice a year. He took a drink of wine. What about you? Any ex-husbands I should know about? Lena laughed. No husbands. A couple of serious relationships that didn't work out. One guy who couldn't handle that my career was more important than his ego. Another who wanted me to be someone I wasn't. She traced the rim of her wine glass. After the second one ended, I decided to focus on building the gallery instead of trying to build a relationship. It seemed safer. Until now. Until now, she agreed. You make it feel less scary. Good. Because you do the same for me. They finished dinner trading stories about their childhoods, discovering shared memories of growing up in San Francisco, comparing notes on teachers they'd both had at different times. The conversation flowed easily, and by the time dessert arrived, Ethan couldn't remember why he'd been nervous. This was just Lena, the same woman he worked beside every day, who knew how he took his coffee and could read his moods from across the building. The only difference was that now they could hold hands across the table and kiss goodnight without pretending it didn't mean anything. On the drive home, Lena moved closer to him in the truck, her head resting on his shoulder. Thank you for tonight, she said. Thank you for saying yes when Sophie made the reservation without asking us. She means well. She really does. They pulled up to the building and sat in the truck for a moment, neither wanting the evening to end. I should go relieve Sophie, Ethan said. Make sure Riley actually went to bed and didn't convince her to let her stay up watching movies. Knowing Riley, she absolutely did that. You're probably right. Lena turned to look at him in the dim light of the cab. I had a really good time tonight. So did I. We should do it again. Definitely. She kissed him, slow and deep, and Ethan lost track of time until someone knocked on the truck window. They broke apart to find Sophie standing outside, grinning like a maniac. Lena rolled down the window. You're the worst. Riley's asleep, the apartment's clean, and you two have been sitting out here for 20 minutes. I figured you needed a reminder that other people exist. We were just, yeah, Sophie waved them off. Get inside before you scandalize the neighbors. They climbed out of the truck, and Sophie disappeared back into the building with a knowing smirk. Ethan walked Lena to her apartment door, their fingers intertwined. Good night, he said. Good night. One more kiss, and then Ethan forced himself to walk away before he did something stupid like suggest she come see his apartment, even though they both knew that would lead to complications they weren't ready for yet. Upstairs, he found Riley in bed exactly as Sophie had promised, her room dark except for the nightlight shaped like a crescent moon. He checked on her, pulling the blanket up over her shoulders, and she stirred slightly. Dad? Yeah, kiddo. Go back to sleep. Did you have a good date? I did. Good, she yawned. I like Lena. Don't mess it up. I'll do my best. Love you, Dad. Love you too, Riles. He left her door cracked and walked to his own room, exhausted but content in a way he couldn't remember feeling before. The pieces of his life were finally fitting together. His work, his daughter, and now Lena, all existing in the same space without conflict. It felt fragile, like something that could break if he wasn't careful, but it also felt real. And for the first time in 6 years, Ethan let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, he deserved this kind of happiness. The months that followed their first date transformed the building into something more than just a shared workspace. It became a home in the truest sense, a place where work and life blended seamlessly, where Riley did homework while artists discussed their latest pieces, where Ethan could look up from his workbench and see Lena through the doorway talking with clients, and feel grateful for every choice that had led him here. But January brought challenges neither of them had anticipated. It started with a phone call Ethan received on a Tuesday morning while he was installing hardware on a custom entertainment center. The number was unfamiliar, but something made him answer. Ethan Walker, speaking. This is Jennifer Carlson. I'm calling from Portland. I believe you know my partner, Amanda Walker? Ethan's hand tightened on the phone. Amanda, his ex-wife. He hadn't heard from her directly in almost 8 months. What's this about? He asked carefully. Amanda and I have been talking, and we'd like to discuss Riley's living arrangements. We think it might be beneficial for her to spend more time up here with us. Amanda's in a better place now, and we have a stable home environment we can offer. The words hit like a physical blow. Riley lives with me. That's not changing. We're not suggesting a permanent move, just extended visits. Summer break, perhaps some holidays. Amanda wants to be more involved in her daughter's life. She had 8 years to be involved. She chose not to be. Jennifer's voice remained professionally calm. People change, Mr. Walker. Amanda has done a lot of work on herself, and she's ready to step up as a parent. We're hoping we can discuss this reasonably, but if necessary, we're prepared to pursue legal avenues to establish a more equitable custody arrangement. Ethan felt ice spread through his chest. You're threatening me with a custody fight. We're suggesting a conversation, but yes, if you're unwilling to work with us, we'll file a formal petition with the court. Riley is happy here. She has a home, a school, stability. You can't just... We can, actually. And we will if we have to. Think about it, Mr. Walker. We'll be in touch. She hung up before he could respond. Ethan stood frozen in his studio, the phone still pressed to his ear, his mind racing through worst-case scenarios. Amanda had surrendered custody willingly years ago. She'd barely maintained contact since moving to Portland. And now, suddenly, she wanted Riley back? It didn't make sense unless something had changed, unless she thought she could actually win. The entertainment center sat half-finished on his workbench, forgotten. He needed to call his lawyer. He needed to figure out what legal ground he stood on. He needed to protect Riley from being pulled into a custody battle she didn't deserve. But first, he needed to tell Lena. He found her in the gallery, arranging a new installation with Sophie's help. The moment she saw his face, her expression shifted from concentration to concern. What's wrong? Can we talk privately? Of course. She turned to Sophie. Can you finish this? Go, Sophie said, already reading the tension in the room. They went to Lena's office, a small space at the back of the gallery that she'd furnished with a desk, filing cabinets, and a comfortable chair for client meetings. Ethan closed the door behind them and leaned against it, trying to organize his thoughts. "My ex-wife's partner just called," he said. "They want to pursue a new custody arrangement for Riley." Lena's eyes widened. What kind of arrangement? Extended visits, maybe more. She claims Amanda's in a better place now and wants to be more involved. Ethan's voice was tight with barely controlled anger. "And if I don't cooperate, they're threatening to take me to court." "Can they do that? Legally?" "I don't know. Maybe. Amanda technically has parental rights even though she gave up custody. If she can prove she's stable now and that Riley would benefit from spending time with her, a judge might agree to modify the arrangement." He ran his hands through his hair. "I need to call my lawyer, but I wanted you to know first." Lena crossed the office and took his hands. "We'll figure this out." "This isn't your problem, Lena. It's mine. We're together now. That makes it our problem." Her voice was firm. "You don't have to handle this alone." "What if it gets ugly? Custody battles can drag on for months, cost thousands of dollars, and put Riley through hell. I won't let her be caught in the middle of that." "Then we make sure it doesn't get to that point." Lena squeezed his hands. "Call your lawyer, find out what your options are. And in the meantime, we protect Riley and make sure she knows she's safe." Ethan pulled her close, holding on like she was the only stable thing in a world that had just tilted sideways. "I can't lose her, Lena." "You won't. I won't let that happen." He wanted to believe her, but fear had already taken root in his chest, spreading like ice through his veins. The lawyer's assessment wasn't encouraging. Ethan met with David Chen, the attorney who'd helped him finalize his divorce years ago, in a downtown office that smelled like old books and expensive coffee. Chen listened to everything, took notes, and then delivered the news Ethan had been dreading. "Your ex-wife has grounds to petition for modified custody," Chen said. "If she can demonstrate stability, steady employment, safe housing, a healthy relationship, and if she can show that increased contact with Riley would be in the child's best interest, a judge might grant her request." "But Riley's happy with me. She doesn't want to move to Portland." "That matters, but it's not the only factor. Courts generally favor arrangements that allow children to have relationships with both parents when possible." Chen leaned back in his chair. "The good news is that you have sole physical custody, Riley's doing well academically and socially, and you've provided a stable home environment for years. Any judge will take that seriously." "So what do we do?" "First, we wait to see if they actually file. Right now, it's just a threat. They might be testing to see if you'll negotiate without involving the courts." Chen tapped his pen against his legal pad. "If they do file, we'll need to document everything. Riley's school performance, her extracurricular activities, character references from teachers and neighbors, evidence of your involvement in her life. We build a case that demonstrates that the current arrangement is working and shouldn't be disrupted. And if we lose, we won't lose custody entirely. Worst case, they get extended visitation rights, summers, alternating holidays, that kind of thing. But let's not assume the worst yet." Ethan left the meeting feeling marginally better, but still anxious. The uncertainty was eating at him, the not knowing whether Amanda would actually follow through or when the other shoe would drop. He drove back to the building in silence, his mind spinning through scenarios. When he arrived, he found Riley in his studio doing homework, completely unaware that her world might be about to change. She looked up and smiled. "Hey, Dad, can you help me with this math problem? I can't figure out the fractions." Ethan sat beside her and looked at the worksheet, forcing himself to focus. "Show me what you've tried so far." They worked through the problem together, Riley's pencil scratching across the paper as she followed his guidance. When she finally got the right answer, she beamed with pride. "I did it!" "You did. Good work, kiddo." She went back to the rest of her homework, and Ethan watched her, memorizing this moment. The way her tongue stuck out slightly when she concentrated, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear every few minutes, the complete trust in her eyes when she looked at him for help. He would fight to keep this, whatever it took. The formal petition arrived 2 weeks later. Ethan found it in his mail on a Friday afternoon, a thick envelope from a Portland law firm, the return address making his stomach drop. He opened it in his studio, hands shaking slightly as he read through the legal language. Amanda Walker was petitioning the court for a modification of custody to establish a shared parenting arrangement. She cited her improved circumstances, her stable relationship with Jennifer Carlson, and her desire to be an active part of Riley's life. The petition requested summer custody, alternating holidays, and monthly weekend visits. It was exactly what he'd been afraid of. Ethan called Chen immediately, forwarding the documents electronically while they talked through next steps. A court date would be set, probably within 60 days. They'd need to file a response, gather evidence, prepare witnesses. It was real now. No more waiting, no more hoping it would go away. He hung up and sat in the quiet studio, the petition still in his hands, feeling the weight of what was coming. Ethan? He looked up to find Lena in the doorway. She'd clearly been watching him, waiting for him to notice her. "It came," he said quietly, holding up the papers. "What does it say?" He handed her the petition and watched her read, her expression growing more serious with each page. When she finished, she set it down on his workbench and sat beside him. "This isn't fair to Riley." "No, it's not." "What did your lawyer say?" "We fight, we document everything, build our case, and show the court that Riley's life shouldn't be disrupted." Ethan's voice was hollow. "And then we hope the judge agrees." "They will. You're a great father, Ethan. Anyone can see that." "Amanda's her mother. That counts for something, even if she's been absent for years." He looked at Lena. "I'm scared, Lena. Really scared." "I know." She took his hand. "But you're not doing this alone. I'm here. Sophie's here. Riley has teachers and friends who'll speak up for her. We're going to show that court exactly what you've built for her." "What if it's not enough?" "It will be. Because you're not just providing for Riley, you're giving her a real home. That matters more than anything Amanda can claim in a legal document." Ethan wanted to believe her. He pulled her close and buried his face in her shoulder, letting himself lean on someone else for the first time in years. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" "For being here. For not running when things got complicated." "I'm not going anywhere," Lena said firmly. "We're in this together." The hardest part came that evening when Ethan had to tell Riley. He waited until after dinner, until they were sitting on the couch in their apartment with hot chocolate and the quiet comfort of their nightly routine. Then he took a deep breath and started. "Riley, I need to talk to you about something important." She set down her mug, immediately sensing the seriousness. "Okay." "Your mom reached out. She wants to spend more time with you. Summers, some holidays, visits during the year." He watched Riley's face carefully. "She's asked the court to change our custody arrangement to make that happen." Riley was quiet for a long moment, processing. "Does that mean I have to live with her?" "No, you'll still live here with me, but you might have to visit Portland more often if the judge decides that's what's best." "What if I don't want to?" "Your opinion matters. The judge will probably ask you what you want when we go to court." "When do we go to court?" "Probably in a couple months. My lawyer will let us know." Riley looked down at her hands, her expression troubled. "I don't remember Mom very well. She calls sometimes, but it's weird. We don't really know what to talk about." "I know, kiddo. Do you think she really wants to be my mom now? Or is she just doing this because she feels like she's supposed to?" The question was so perceptive, so much older than her 8 years, that Ethan felt his heart break a little. "I don't know what she's thinking," he said honestly. "But whatever happens, you're safe here. That's not changing. Promise?" "I promise." Riley leaned against him, and he wrapped his arm around her shoulders. They sat like that for a while, hot chocolate cooling on the table, the weight of uncertainty settling over them both. "Dad?" "Yeah?" "I'm glad you and Lena are together. It makes things feel less scary." Ethan kissed the top of her head. "Me too, Riles. Me too." The next 8 weeks were a blur of preparation. Chen compiled evidence, school records showing Riley's excellent grades, letters from teachers praising Ethan's involvement, testimonials from neighbors and Sophie about the stable home environment he'd created. They documented Riley's activities, her friendships, her happiness. They built a picture of a child who was thriving exactly where she was. Lena helped however she could, taking Riley to activities when Ethan had meetings with the lawyer, offering emotional support when the stress became overwhelming, reminding him to eat and sleep when he got too focused on preparing for the worst. Sophie watched over all of them, making sure the gallery and studio kept running even when Ethan's attention was divided, organizing schedules and handling logistics with quiet efficiency. And through it all, Riley remained remarkably steady. She seemed to understand that her world might change and was preparing herself for it with a resilience that amazed Ethan. The court date arrived on a gray March morning. Ethan wore his only suit, the one he'd bought for his father's funeral years ago and hadn't touched since. Riley stayed with Sophie for the day. Chen had advised keeping her out of the courtroom unless the judge specifically requested to speak with her. Lena came with him, dressed professionally and carrying herself with a quiet confidence that helped Ethan keep his composure. They met Chen at the courthouse steps, reviewed the strategy one final time, and walked inside together. The courtroom was smaller than Ethan had expected, wood-paneled and formal, with harsh fluorescent lighting that made everything feel stark and cold. Amanda was already there with Jennifer and their lawyer, a sharp-looking woman in her 50s who exuded competence. Amanda looked different, healthier, maybe, or more put together than the last time he'd seen her. She caught his eye and offered a small, nervous smile. He didn't return it. The judge, a stern woman named Margaret Lynn, called the case and listened to opening statements from both lawyers. Amanda's attorney painted a picture of a mother who'd struggled after Riley's birth, who'd made the difficult choice to step back when she wasn't ready to parent, and who had now done the work to become stable and present. Chen countered with Ethan's story, a father who'd stepped up completely when his daughter needed him, who'd built a life centered around her well-being, who'd provided consistency and love for 8 years without fail. Then came the witnesses. Amanda's lawyer called character witnesses who spoke about Amanda's growth, her stable relationship with Jennifer, the home they'd prepared for Riley in Portland. They were compelling, sincere, and made Amanda's case seem reasonable. When it was Chen's turn, he called Riley's teacher, Mrs. Patterson, who described Riley as a bright, engaged student whose love for her father was obvious in everything she did. He called one of Ethan's longtime clients who'd known him for years and could speak to his character and dedication. He called Sophie, who testified about watching Ethan raise Riley alone, about the partnership with Lena and how it had created an even more stable environment for Riley. And finally, he called Lena. She took the stand with calm dignity, answered questions about when she'd met Ethan, how she'd come to know Riley, what she'd observed about their relationship. Her voice was steady as she described the home they'd all built together, the way Riley thrived in the environment Ethan had created. "Do you believe Riley is happy in her current situation?" Chen asked. "Absolutely," Lena said without hesitation. "She's confident, creative, loved, and secure. She knows her father will always be there for her. That's not something you can replicate just by deciding you're ready to be a parent now." Amanda's lawyer tried to cross-examine, suggesting that Lena's relationship with Ethan biased her testimony, but Lena held firm. "My relationship with Ethan doesn't change what I've observed," she said. "Riley is thriving. Any disruption to her current stability would be harmful, regardless of the intentions behind it." After testimony concluded, Judge Lin called a recess to review the evidence. Ethan, Lena, and Chen waited in the hallway, the minutes stretching into an eternity. "How do you think it went?" Ethan asked. "I think we made a strong case," Chen said. "But judges are unpredictable. We'll know soon enough." When they were called back into the courtroom, Judge Lin looked at both parties with an unreadable expression. "I've reviewed all testimony and evidence presented today," she began. "This is a difficult case because both parties clearly care about Riley's well-being, even if they've expressed that care differently over the years." Ethan's heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. "Miss Walker, I commend you for the work you've done to become stable and for wanting to be present in your daughter's life. However, I'm troubled by the fact that you've had minimal contact with Riley for the majority of her childhood. A child's need for consistency and stability cannot be understated, and Riley has had that with her father." Amanda's face fell, but the judge wasn't finished. "Mr. Walker, you've demonstrated exceptional dedication as a parent. The evidence shows that Riley is happy, healthy, and thriving in your care. I'm not inclined to disrupt that based on a sudden desire for increased involvement from a parent who has been largely absent." Relief flooded through Ethan, but he forced himself to stay still, to wait for the official ruling. "However," Judge Lin continued, "I do believe Riley would benefit from having some relationship with her mother, provided it's done gradually, and with Riley's comfort as the priority. Therefore, I'm ordering a modified arrangement that maintains Mr. Walker's sole physical custody but establishes supervised visitation rights for Miss Walker." She outlined the specifics: 1 weekend per month in Portland with supervision from a court-appointed monitor to be reevaluated after 6 months based on Riley's adjustment and Amanda's consistency in maintaining contact. No overnight visits until the 6-month review. No changes to holidays or summer breaks until a proven track record was established. It wasn't everything Ethan had hoped for, but it wasn't the nightmare he'd feared either. This court is adjourned. Amanda looked devastated. Her lawyer was already talking to her in low tones, probably explaining that this was better than being denied entirely. Jennifer put an arm around her shoulders. Ethan turned to Lena, and she threw her arms around him. "You did it," she whispered. "Riley stays with you." "We did it," he corrected. "I couldn't have done this without you." Chen shook his hand, satisfied with the outcome. "This was the best result we could have hoped for. Riley maintains her primary home with you, and Amanda gets a chance to slowly build a relationship. If she's serious about being a mother, she'll do the work. If not, the visits will taper off naturally." Ethan nodded, still processing. It was over. The uncertainty, the fear, the months of preparation, all of it had led to this moment where Riley's life remained fundamentally unchanged. As they left the courthouse, Amanda approached them. "Ethan, can I talk to you for a second?" Lena squeezed his hand and stepped aside, giving them privacy. Amanda looked smaller somehow, less threatening than she'd seemed when this all started. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry for all of it, for leaving, for staying away, for putting Riley through this." "Then why did you?" Ethan asked. "Because Jennifer convinced me I should try, and I thought maybe I could make up for lost time." She wiped her eyes. "But standing in that courtroom, listening to people talk about the life you've built for her, I realized I don't actually know my daughter, and that's my fault, not yours." "So what now?" "I'll do the visits. I'll show up if Riley wants me to, and if she doesn't, I'll understand." Amanda's voice broke slightly. "You're a good father, Ethan. Better than I ever gave you credit for. Riley's lucky to have you. Thank you for saying that. Take care of her. I always have." Amanda walked away and Lena returned to Ethan's side. They stood on the courthouse steps together, the gray sky overhead threatening rain, and Ethan felt the last of the tension drain from his shoulders. "Let's go home," he said. "Let's go home," Lena agreed. They picked up Riley from the building, and Ethan explained the judge's decision in terms she could understand. She listened carefully, then asked, "So I still live with you?" "You still live with me, and I have to visit Mom sometimes? Once a month, if she follows through, and only if you're comfortable with it." Riley thought about that. "Okay, I can try. But if I don't like it, can I stop?" "We'll figure it out together," Ethan promised. She seemed satisfied with that answer and went back to the drawing she'd been working on with Sophie. That evening, after Riley was in bed, Ethan and Lena sat on the couch in his apartment, exhausted but relieved. The weight of the last 2 months had finally lifted, leaving them both feeling lighter. "I don't know how to thank you," Ethan said, "for everything you did to help with this. You don't have to thank me. This is what partners do. Still, I know it wasn't easy getting dragged into my custody drama. It wasn't drama. It was your life, which means it's my life too now." Lena leaned against him. "Besides, Riley's worth it. You're worth it." Ethan kissed her temple. "I love you." The words slipped out before he could stop them, but once they were said, he realized he meant them completely. Lena turned to look at him, her eyes wide. "What did you say?" "I love you," he repeated, more certain this time. "I know it's only been a few months and maybe it's too soon, but it's true. You've become essential to my life, Lena, to Riley's life. And I don't want to pretend I don't feel it anymore." Lena's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "I love you too. I have for a while, actually. I just wasn't sure how to say it." "Well, now we've both said it." "Now we've both said it," she echoed. They kissed, deep and slow, and Ethan felt something click into place, the final piece of the life he'd been building without realizing it. He had his daughter, his work, his home, and now this woman who'd walked into his life desperate and soaking wet and had somehow become everything he didn't know he needed. It felt complete. It felt like home. 6 months later, on a warm September evening, Ethan stood in the gallery watching Riley's first art exhibition. Lena had organized it as a surprise, a small show featuring work from local children with Riley as one of the featured artists. A dozen of her drawings and paintings hung on the gallery walls, professionally matted and framed, looking like they belonged there. Riley stood beside her pieces, beaming as visitors asked her questions about her work. She explained her techniques with surprising confidence, her enthusiasm infectious. "She's a natural," Sophie said, appearing beside Ethan with 2 glasses of wine. "She gets it from Lena," Ethan said. "All those afternoons in the gallery learning about art." "Maybe, but the confidence, that's all you." Ethan watched his daughter glow under the attention, surrounded by people who appreciated her talent, and felt a swell of pride so strong it threatened to overwhelm him. Lena joined them, slipping her hand into his. "What do you think?" "I think this is perfect. She deserves it. She's worked hard on these pieces." "You didn't have to do this." "I wanted to. Riley's part of this place now, just like you are. It felt right to showcase her work." Amanda had maintained the monthly visits for the first 3 months. Then they'd started tapering off as Riley's discomfort became obvious, and Amanda realized she didn't actually have the tools to build a relationship with a daughter she barely knew. The last visit had been 6 weeks ago, and there hadn't been any contact since. Chen said it was common that parents who pushed for custody often backed off once they realized how much work actual parenting required. Riley seemed relieved more than anything. She sent her mother a card on Mother's Day and accepted the occasional phone call, but she'd stopped asking when the next visit would be. The court would likely close the case at the next review, citing Amanda's failure to maintain consistent contact. It was sad in a way, but it also felt like closure. "Dad, come look at this," Riley called from across the gallery, waving him over. Ethan excused himself and crossed the room to where Riley stood beside a painting of their building. She'd captured it in watercolors, the red brick glowing in afternoon light, the windows reflecting sky. At the bottom, she'd painted 3 figures standing in the doorway, clearly meant to be Ethan, Lena, and herself. "When did you paint this?" he asked. "Last week. Lena helped me with the perspective." Riley looked up at him. "Do you like it?" "I love it. It's beautiful, Riles." "It's home," she said simply. "That's what I wanted to paint." Ethan pulled her into a hug, overwhelmed by the moment, by how far they'd come from that rainy night when Lena had appeared at his door, by everything that had happened since, by the family they'd accidentally built together. Later that night, after the exhibition ended and Riley was asleep in her room upstairs, Ethan and Lena sat on the balcony of her apartment, sharing a bottle of wine and watching the city lights spread out below them. "I've been thinking," Lena said, "about the future." "Yeah? What about it?" "About us. About where this is going." She turned to face him. "I know we've been taking things slow, being careful not to rush into anything, but I don't want to be careful anymore, Ethan. I want to build something permanent with you." Ethan's heart rate picked up. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want to marry you. Eventually. Not tomorrow, not even this year necessarily, but someday. I want Riley to know she has a family that's not going anywhere. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want all of it." "Lena, you don't have to answer right now," she said quickly. "I just wanted you to know what I'm thinking, where my head is." Ethan set down his wine glass and took both of her hands. "You want to know what I'm thinking?" "Yes. I'm thinking you're the best thing that's ever happened to me. I'm thinking I spent 6 years telling myself I didn't need anyone else, and then you proved me wrong in every possible way. I'm thinking I want exactly what you want, the marriage, the family, the whole future together." Lena's eyes went wide. "Really?" "Really," he smiled. "So yes, Lena Hart, someday when the time is right, I would love to marry you." She kissed him, laughing and crying at the same time, and Ethan held her close while the city hummed below them and their future stretched out like an open road. They didn't need to rush. They had time to do this right, to build their life together with the same care and attention they'd given to building their businesses. They had Riley's well-being to consider, logistics to work out, a million small decisions to make. But they'd figure it out together. That was the whole point. 1 year after Lena had shown up at his warehouse door, desperate and soaking wet, Ethan Walker stood in his studio and realized he'd built something he never expected. Not just a successful business or a beautiful space, but a real home filled with people who chose to stay. Riley burst through the door from the gallery, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. "Dad, can Lena and I go to the art supply store? She said she'd buy me oil pastels if you said it was okay." Lena appeared behind her, looking slightly apologetic. "I may have promised before checking with you." "Oil pastels are expensive," Ethan said, but he was already reaching for his wallet. "I'll pay," Lena protested. "No, let me. She's my kid, and she's been asking for them for months." Riley beamed. "Does that mean yes?" "That means yes." She threw her arms around him, then grabbed Lena's hand. "Come on, before Dad changes his mind." They disappeared back into the gallery, Lena glancing over her shoulder to mouth "thank you" at him. Ethan just smiled and returned to the dining table he was working on, his hands moving through familiar motions while his mind wandered through memories. He thought about the moment he'd opened his door to find Lena standing in the rain, how his first instinct had been caution, how he'd almost turned her away. He thought about building that makeshift room in a single night, about exposing Calloway's fraud, about taking the leap into partnership even when it scared him. He thought about falling in love with a woman who'd appeared at exactly the right moment, who'd reminded him that walls built to protect could also become prisons. And he thought about Riley, always Riley, and how every choice he'd made had been about giving her the best life possible. Somehow, in trying to do that, he'd ended up with the best life possible himself. The wood grain under his hands was smooth and honest, the smell of sawdust familiar and comforting. Through the doorway, he could hear Lena and Riley's laughter echoing in the gallery, the sound of home. Ethan Walker had learned to measure his life in careful increments, 6-foot planks, quarter-inch dowels, 45-degree miters. Everything precise, everything intentional, everything under control. But the best things in his life hadn't been measured or planned. They'd arrived unexpected and chaotic, demanding trust and courage and a willingness to let go of control. They'd arrived in the form of 2 women standing at his door in the rain, asking for help. And he'd said yes. That single decision had changed everything. As the afternoon sun slanted through the studio windows and dust motes danced in the light, Ethan finished the last detail on the dining table and stepped back to admire his work. It was solid, level, built to last, just like everything else in his life now. Not perfect, but real. Not simple, but worth it. Home.